Washington Journal continues.
We're joined now by Congressman Dennis Kucinich, a Democrat from Ohio, for a conversation about progressives and their relationship with the president. But, Congressman, first I want to start with the hearing that's going on today in the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, which you're a part of, on Obama's green energy agenda. As a job creation tool, has the Obama administration's investments in this sector been worth it to you that you've seen?
Well, investments sometimes take a while to get a return. I favor a much more aggressive approach in getting NASA involved with a larger budget where NASA would be an incubator of green technology and then license or sell it to the private sector to create millions of new jobs in wind and solar microtechnologies, so many different energy technologies we could, that we could take a new direction with. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Solyndra hearing today. I'll be listening carefully to the testimony.
How much pause should Solyndra give the Obama administration? There's been a lot of concern. Your committee is thinking about stepping in and doing its own investigation. The Energy and Commerce Committee launched an investigation back in the spring, but the Republican chairman, has said he's thinking about doing an investigation. How much pause?
Well, if you have a $500 million loan that goes south, you should look at it. But there were investors there. There were people in the private sector who felt there was some worth. So I don't want to prejudge the testimony. I want to listen to the testimony and join with my colleagues in asking questions. But as far as a green energy approach, are you kidding? I mean, if we don't move towards a green energy, then we're trapped by oil. And with peak oil being a reality, our choice is we're either going to ruin the earth, plunder it, increase pollution, be in more wars, or we're going to make a transition towards a greener and cleaner economy and create jobs doing it. But right now, we are in a rut caused by an addiction to oil, and it was a few years ago that Wall Street was cautioning investors, don't go green, stay with oil, stay with nuclear, stay with and coal, which all are quite problematic in terms of the environmental impact. So it's time that we cannot let, whatever happens in this hearing with Solyndra, we cannot let it be the basis for trying to wreck all of the worthy enterprises that are out there and that are trying to take America and its economy in a direction that's more sustainable.
Again, we're talking to Dennis Kucinich, a Democrat from Ohio, who's a member of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee and Education and Workforce Committee as well. If you want to join in on the conversation on the Democratic line, give us a call, 202-737-0001, Republican line 202-737-0002, the Independent line 202-628-0205, and if you're outside the United States, 202-628-0184. Congressman, I want to stick on that subject for just a little bit longer. There's been reports coming out starting last night about Republican members of the Oversight Committee, including Chairman Issa, who sent letters to the Department of Energy advocating for clean energy, green energy projects in their districts. Surprising to you?
Well, I would hope that members on both sides of the aisle would be strongly in favor of a transition in our economy away from oil dependency and towards actually lowering the cost of utility rates, lowering the amount of pollution that's out there, which would have a favorable impact on our global climate. We should be united on this because we're all affected by the environmental impact of pollution, which comes from the burning of hydrocarbons.
But with the amount of criticism on green energy, it doesn't surprise you that they...
Look, today there'll be a fight over one loan. And Congress has a right to inspect what happened with that loan. It was over $500 million. We sure should ask questions. But I think that most members realize that we cannot let the foibles over a single loan deter us from engaging in an effort to move our economy in a direction that's more sustainable and more financially independent. And so we really should not let this hearing frame a debate over whether or not we use green energy. That would be ridiculous.
Well, one of the green energy projects that has been under criticism out there is the loan program for alternative energy vehicles. This is what has been the subject of some of the cuts that Republicans want to make for disaster aid funding. How is this going to play out? This is an article from today, actually, in the Baltimore Sun. The fight over disaster aid stirs fears of a shutdown in Congress again.
Well, the American people have a right to expect that within our political system that Democrats and Republicans will find a way to settle differences and keep the country going forward. I mean, that's not an extravagant expectation, frankly. It's what we're supposed to do. Now, are there real differences? Yes, there are. But we've got to find a way to work towards, through those differences. And there's bigger issues at stake here. I mean, there are well, we're talking about a government shutdown in Washington. There's 6.5 million Americans who are on the verge of losing their homes. There's 14 million Americans who are out of work. And there's millions of young people who will not have the chance to go to college because their families don't have the resources anymore. You know, and there's the elderly who are worried about Social Security. We have to start focusing on the practical aspirations of people and be careful that these internecine political battles, which occur on Capitol Hill, do not become an end game in and of themselves. We've got to keep our eye on the bigger picture, which includes, by the way, ending the wars once and for all. So I'm hopeful that there'll be a way to work out the differences.
Well, you say a big part of that is wanting to get people back to work. What do you make of the president's plan that he's put forth to get America back and his deficit reduction plan he introduced this week?
Well, let's look at the deficit reduction plan first. $1.1 trillion of it is to end the wars or to draw them down. Look, at the same time, we hear reports that the United States may be in Afghanistan through 2024, that there's a real push inside Washington to stay in Iraq. The policy will drive the numbers. So, it was 10 years ago. I have this analysis of a joint resolution on Iraq that I gave the members of Congress 10 years ago, stating there was no reason to go to war against Iraq. We will spend, according to Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz and his associate Linda Bilmes, over $3 trillion on that war. We're still in Iraq. Get out of Iraq, and then you have some credibility on those budget numbers. Get out of Afghanistan, and then you have credibility on the budget numbers, because that's a big part of the deficit reduction. Now, on the job side, with 14 million unemployed, it's good that the president will spend $140 billion, I believe it is, on infrastructure, but we need shovel-ready projects. We need to get people to work now. I don't know how much of that will be immediately in the pipeline. Keep in mind that it was when Congressman Oberstar was the chairman of the Transportation Committee, he had a $500 billion transportation bill, which couldn't get the administration's approval. That had a lot of shovel-ready projects in it. The people in the administration felt it was too big. We need something on the scale of what Jim Oberstar proposed 2 years ago to get America back to work. And I introduced a bill yesterday in the House of Representatives.
And I want to get into the NEED Act.
That is aimed at creating millions of new jobs by taking a different approach with our monetary that would enable the government at once to finally regain its constitutional presence, to be able to invest in our own country and not keep having to depend on banks who, frankly, are strangling the American economy in their own interest.
Let's get into the details of that in a second. But first, a few calls. On the Republican line, Bill from Alexandria, Virginia. Go ahead, Bill. Bill, you there? We'll head over to the independent line. We'll get Ed on the independent line from Washington, Indiana. Ed, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Ed.
Doing real good. Mr. Kucinich, I wish that I lived in a district where I could vote for you. I agree with almost everything you stand for and what you do. But I'll tell you, the fact that we don't have the pipeline for natural gas along our interstate systems to use American natural gas, really, it just burns me up. We can't keep taking these energy shocks. The general people out here that are working for a living. And the United States has no energy policy. I don't know what we've been doing since the first Arab embargoes back in the 70s. I mean, I sat in lines for, hours. And we're still doing nothing. It's like nobody's home. I wished you had more ability to do things and get things straightened out.
Thanks, Ed. Congressman, what can you do?
Well, first of all,